Welcome to Writer Reading for May 2026, Zombie Survival Awareness Month. This month I will be reading the chapters of How to Become a Crazy Cat Lady to Survive the Zombpocalypse. How to Become a Crazy Cat Lady to Survive the Zombpocalypse. Chapter 6. Babs sunk deeper into depression as days turned into 2 weeks. She had called every hospital and urgent care clinic until they stopped answering her calls. Bill was nowhere to be found, and she worried he was dead. She couldn't even go to the hospital in person because that was forbidden. The news blasted out alerts about the whole country being housebound again. Quarantine Level 2 restrictions were expected to be changed to Level 1 soon. Babs spat out the last of the toothpaste in the sink and then muttered a curse as she watched the foamy mess go down the drain, barely listening to the warning. Under the tightening protocols, the Federal Quarantine Department has announced all residents and businesses marked with a blue index card-size notice are considered contaminated zones and should not be entered under any circumstances. The FQD has. Babs had worked in isolation as the sole library on-site staff for months, so the Federal Quarantine Department's latest lockdown restrictions meant nothing to her daily routine as the caretaker of the books of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. She could order anything she needed from the internet and have it delivered to the library, but she didn't order her groceries from them because her therapist told her she needed to leave her home once per week. She wondered if her therapist would call next Thursday. It wasn't like Dr. Merced to miss calling as he had this week or last week. When he called next time, she could tell him her weekly requirement to get out of the library had been met. She planned to retrieve her groceries and medications without having an anxiety attack. It gave her a goal for the day. While the announcer droned on in an overly serious tone, she opened her kitchen cabinets. Today was her day to pick up a grocery order, meds from the pharmacy, and enjoy an hour of outside time. She had a package or two of ramen noodles, a small can of organic bean soup, some crackers, and a half-eaten box of Fig Newtons. She couldn't even make more noodles because she was out of flour. After checking the security cameras, she shrugged into her coat and put on her mask and gloves, determined to go out anyway. People went out all the time during the last 4 pandemics, and she needed her orders today or she would starve tomorrow. She was shocked to find 2 cat hairs on her sleeve. Sighing as she walked out, she hoped the Asian grocery had coffee and creamer or tea this time. She was tired of instant powdered coffee-flavored drinks. It was cold, but she decided she would endure it just to be outside again. The wind blew between the brownstones, and the leaves tumbled and twirled in spiral dances down the street as she walked. The bright sunlight didn't warm her at all. When she got to the pharmacy, the door was unlocked, but the store was open. The store was empty. "Hello, Mr. Ocampo?" No one answered, and she wondered if he had gone out to make a delivery and forgotten to lock up. Shaking her head, Babs pulled what she wanted off the shelves, including a new box of Fig Newtons and some toothpaste. She used her punch code for the button lock on the counter door and got her prescription out of a labeled bin. After she scanned her purchases and paid with a card, she put them in her backpack. She was grateful for the overnights she spent as cashier to make extra money for her student loan debt. Walking out, she barely noticed a blue index card on the door as she locked it. In the back of her mind, Bags vaguely remembered something about them on the news. Ignoring it, Babs walked to Lurling's grocery basket a few blocks away, wondering if they were even open. In the distance, she heard popping sounds. Their rapid staccato sounded like drumsticks on a metal drum far away. As she walked, she noticed more blue cards. Lurling's grocery basket was closed, with no lights on, and she guessed the owners hadn't found anyone to work after Bill's disappearance. She wiped away a tear. She couldn't make herself accept his death. It was just easier to believe he was taken to another city with working hospitals. Since she couldn't pick up her order, she trudged back north and over a block. Pulling her scarf tighter around her face and neck, it seemed colder than the weather forecast predicted. She decided she would just have to get what she could at the Asian market on the way home. A few people were ambling about in the distance, but Bab ignored them like they ignored her. They seemed to be hurrying toward the sound as the drumming, popping sound echoed discordantly around the brownstones and down the empty streets. The Asian market was also empty. As Babs opened the door, blue confetti danced across the floor in the wind that came in with her. "Mrs. Tran? Mr. Tran? I'm here for my order. Hello? It's it's Babette Bland from the library. I came for my order," she repeated louder. No one answered. The owners weren't here, and neither was their usual clerk. Worriedly, Babs went into the back and up the apartment stairs. No one was home above the store. In the storeroom on the main floor, the pickup orders were meticulously organized. Let me say that again. In the storeroom on the main floor, the pickup orders were meticulously organized by address. Babs noticed her elderly neighbor had an order too, so she put them in the shopping cart together, along with the part from a glass front cooler. She grabbed extra ramen and dry bean soup mixes and a container of wheat flour and containers of wheat flour, buckwheat flour, tapioca, and rice flour. She left a note for Mrs. Tran, knowing the lady would simply bill her online account as she had done since the Pandemic 4 resurgence. Strolling up Park Avenue, Babs saw no one else as she went to the library's back entrance. She was grateful the homeless drunk who bit her sleeve had not returned. Autumn was always her favorite time of year, but she did not regret not going to the park today because the wind was so bitterly cold. First, she walked downstairs to her little apartment where she put her groceries away before she went to the brownstone where Mrs. Pratt lived. There was a sealed card with her name on it and a bag of books just inside the entryway between the two doors. Opening the card, Babs read her boss's swirly script. "Babette, I decided to go see my grandkids before those paranoid doctors shut down the country again. Sorry about missing Sunday brunch and tea. Please hold my book order. I'll call when I get back. Thank you and stay safe, Matilda Pratt." Carrying Mrs. Pratt's groceries back to the library, Babs left the books in the bag to be sterilized, as she did with all books that went out and then came back. She decided she would put Matilda's groceries in her home as she tucked a dozen eggs next to her own because they wouldn't keep. She got the key out and went back to Matilda's, putting everything away, tucking the yeast-preserved perishable items in the refrigerator. Milk, butter, lunch meat, cheese, and bread all contained Pharaoh's yeast extract now. It surprised her how much contaminated food Matilda had in her cabinets. The elderly woman seemed to make much of her food from scratch, as Babs did. Babs hoped Matilda made it home safely as she left a note and locked the door behind her. At the library services desk, there were no emails requesting book deliveries, so she didn't bother to check the charge of her electric car. She wouldn't be leaving, so it was pointless. Everything felt pointless. With Matilda gone, Babs felt especially alone. With Matilda gone, Babs didn't even have someone she could call and talk to. The sudden realization she was the only one on the whole block made her overwhelmed, and she sat down to cry. She went upstairs to the second floor and sat staring out at the trees across the street, watching the leaves torn off and carried away by the wind. As the sun set, she skipped dinner, took her antidepressants, and then cued the flat screen to her favorite national parks scenery playlist and began jogging on her elliptical since she hadn't jogged around the park today. She spent hours running through places she had never visited and might never get to visit since the national parks had been closed to visitors after the third pandemic. Finally, her legs gave out and she fell painfully. Laying on the floor, she clutched her arm and wept. Without showering, she crawled into bed and curled into a ball. The next morning, Babs walked through the library like a robot, checking the return bin by the door. It was empty. She swept up the leaves by the front door that had blown into the entry, then swept the loading and delivery dock. Her online order hadn't come, so she could get no response to her emails as about when it would arrive. Bored, she spent 4 hours sending emails to or leaving voicemails for those with overdue books again, even offering to come and pick them up if needed. Then she dusted the second and third floor bookshelves to keep busy. In the late afternoon, she heard a siren and shooting. Peeking out of the window, Babs saw a car careen around a corner, then speed down the street going the wrong way as a military Hummer pursued it. She watched the car chase vanish from view while she wondered what fool thought they could get away with breaking the noon curfew because it was after 4 p.m. Babs reset the lighting to auto-dim at sunset instead of turning on because there was no point in having the lights up if no one could come in. When they dimmed, she went downstairs to eat dinner. Every day was the same. Check for book request, clean shelves, and read books she hadn't read before. In the evenings, she watched the library's archive of Hallmark movies and missed everything she and Bill would never have. 1 week later, the news seemed to be on repeat. The same warning about stay inside and having no contact with people and beware of places with blue cards, blah, 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 Babs thought grumpily. She watched only to get the weather forecast on the day she needed to leave the library. Her therapist had insisted she avoid the news and social media at all cost because it triggered her anxiety attacks. She didn't need to go to the pharmacy again, and the park was out, but she was determined to pick up her groceries from the Asian market since her online order never came. Going out, it felt much colder than the weather segment promised as she pushed the cart to take it back to the store, grumbling about worthless weather reporters. Again, she saw no one. Babs looked up at the few leaves still clinging to a tree, then she bumped into something with the cart she was taking back to the market. At first, she thought it was a mannequin. Then she saw all of it, or rather him. A man, a dead man, with his skin turned mottled. Black tears had leaked from his eyes and dried like cheap makeup. His leg was sticking out of a pile of trash bags on which he had fallen. Leaves were piled around him. His teeth were clenched and bared as purple-black lips pulled back in a grimace. There was a hole in his forehead. Babs had never seen a dead body before. Jumping back, she sprinted to the Asian market while she dialed 911 on her phone. No one answered, just the same annoying recording telling her no operators were available. "Help me," she yelped as she stumbled into the door. "Mrs. Tran? Mr. Tran? Anyone?" The Asian market looked exactly as she had left it. It was so eerie. No one was here either. Panicked, Babs ran to the door from door to door, begging for help, while listening to the 911 recording telling her to leave a message and response would be delayed. No one answered the doors on the homes she knocked on. She was completely alone. Her panic turned to shock, and her emotions shut down. Walking back, she acted on autopilot. Returning to the Asian market, she noticed for the first time the power was out. The Tran's apartment above the store was unchanged. In the back room, the only pickup orders missing were the ones she had taken. She opened one of the bags and then vomited in the bin next to the desk, realizing how very wrong everything was. She could smell the rotting food in the delivery bags and coolers. Mr. and Mrs. Tran would never willingly leave their home and the store they had spent decades running after immigrating from the Philippines, unless someone made them leave. Filling a cart with coffee, tea, bags of flour and sugar, containers of nuts, and boxes of noodles safe for her to eat, she then began to pile the last of the unspoiled, untreated apples and vegetables on top, and was grateful the cool temps had saved them. She took everything she could eat without triggering her Pharaoh's yeast allergy. She pushed the overloaded cart home on the opposite side of the street from the body. Stopping at the pharmacy, Babs shook to see the door broken in and the shelves ransacked. Someone had taken all the narcotics from the pharmacy. Not knowing when she would be able to get more, she took two 1,000 count bottles of her antidepressants, 3 EpiPens from the shelf, and all of her type of allergy medication and rescue inhaler refills. She grabbed a few bottles of vitamins to stave off malnutrition and the feminine hygiene products she preferred. Then she began to pile more coffee, tea, noodles, and nuts into her cart. Anything without Pharaoh's yeast extract went into her cart. Then her panicking mind pointed out she couldn't push 2 carts. She needed the car. She hurried back to the library with her first load of stolen supplies and her medications. Looking up at the clear blue sky, she remembered the solar panels on the roof of the library powered the block, and she wondered how long the power had been out. That was when she noticed a blue card on the barred security door of Mrs. Pratt's building. Leaving the cart, Babs looked at it carefully. By F.Q.D. orders, all residents are to shelter in place due to the risk of exposure. The National Guard will instruct you when to report to Raven's Arena for the evacuation. If a member of your family experiences sudden death, remove the body and place it in a locked room or secured basement until it can be removed by authorities. The instructions for decontaminating oneself followed, along with bizarre instructions to decapitate or incinerate corpses immediately so they could not revive. It sounded crazy. Abandoning her cart, Babs rushed across the street. The Archdiocese office building was unlocked and strangely empty. There was no power in the building, so she climbed up 7 flights of stairs to the roof and looked toward the US 40 and Interstate 83 interchange. There were no cars on the overpass bridge or moving on the side roads. Turning towards the inner harbor area, there were no boats on the water or helicopters in the air or contrails from the jets in the sky. Nothing to show she wasn't completely alone. Panting, she went down the stairs slower. Shakily, she pushed the cart inside, trying to remember the name of a movie she thought Will Smith was in. She could only remember him going from building to building with a dog, looking for canned goods and telling it to eat its vegetables. She feared she would be doing that soon. As the door closed behind her, Babs sat on the floor and cried for several minutes. Then she made herself get up and fetch her keys, and the keys Bill had given her. Driving back to the pharmacy, she loaded the car, then went to Lurling's grocery basket. There were a few burnt cars in the parking lot, and the windows of the front were smashed in. Babs parked in the rear grocery pickup area and used Bill's keys to open the door. The main part of the store looked like it had been looted, but the shrink-wrapped pallets on the upper shelves of the warehouse part had been left alone. She carried a basket through the aisles, gathering a few bags of rice and dried beans. Most of the food left behind and not smashed on the floor was stuff she couldn't eat. Going back to the warehouse, she used her flashlight to look at the pallets. Most of it looked like pet food. There were a few pallets of cooking foil, toilet paper, paper and plastic dishes, and other non-food items. Then she saw it, a single pallet with Babette in spray paint on the top shelf. She would need a ladder to get to it. Since she didn't know how long the power had been out, she held her breath as she opened the walk-in freezer. The flashing of her... Let me start that again. Flashing her phone flashlight around, she froze in horror. Bill was slumped in the corner. She suffered the heartbreaking realization he had lied to her about going to the hospital. Without his mask on, she could see the discoloration around his mouth and the black tears seeped from his eyes. His body was bloated and putrefying as it thawed. He was holding his phone in his hand. Sobbing gags choked Babs as she ran out, tripping over her basket of beans and rice. She left it behind and drove back to the library like a madwoman. Unloading everything into the hall, she unpacked it and sprayed it with cans of sanitizing spray while crying in heaving sobs into her mask. Afterward, she followed the decontamination instructions on the FQD blue card. Then she turned on the TV again. Every 4 hours, the same news broadcast repeated. She went upstairs to the computer area of the library. On the internet, she read horrific stories of mass deaths globally. The Centers for Disease Controls and the World Health Organization were saying it was some kind of fungus-caused pneumonia that spread to the eyes and mouth like thrush. It was fatal to all who caught it. The library was off-grid to save money and the fact the library was off-grid to save money had staved off her discovery that the city power shut down 6 days earlier. Sequestered in her anti-media bubble, the one her therapist suggested she create to keep her anxiety at bay during Pandemic 4, Dr. Babette Bland had not known the world ended. Next, Chapter 7.